Hey everyone, today I've got some wicked cool science news. If you're interested in science, which you probably are since you listen to my podcast, chances are you also listen to other sources of scientific information, like more professional media outlets and documentaries and stuff like that. A particularly favorite subject for wildlife documentarians are the so-called zombie funguses, which take over their host and use their body as a vessel to spread more spores and infect more hosts. The most famous zombie fungus is the Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, which infects ants and can potentially kill an entire ant colony. It's popular in documentaries and stuff because it's just so incredibly violent and gnarly. The fact that the fungal infection seizes control of the host's nervous system is as intimate as it is terrifying. These zombie funguses are so named because they're excellent fodder for science fiction zombie movies, and because their mechanism of action imitates how we believe zombies would act in a way that we would consider zombie-like. However, despite how amazing and brutal and fascinating they are, they've been the subject of relatively little formal study. For example, the actual mechanism of action through which the zombie fungus takes over its host has been unknown for decades, until some recent research has shined a light on it. And that's the research that I want to talk about today. Researchers at UC Berkeley have recently published a study in the journal BioRx4 demonstrating how the fungus Entomopthora muscae can take over the nervous system of flies. In the case of ants, the zombie fungus cordyceps will direct the ant to grip onto a leaf or a branch at a low altitude near the damp, dark forest floor so that it can sprout its fruiting bodies and spread its spores. In the case of the flies that are infected with E. muscae, the fungus has the flies crawl upwards, somewhere high up off of the forest floor, where they then anchor themselves to a plant with the proboscis, and they raise the fly's wings in a so-called death pose. Raising the wings and entering this death pose optimizes the fly's body to support the fungus's growth. In this position, the E. muscae fungus sprouts its fruiting bodies and can release its spores, which will then, because of its elevation, rain down on all of the flies living below. In their research, the scientists collected flies infected with E. muscae and positioned them in agar in their death pose, so as to encourage the fungus to sprout its fruiting bodies. Every 24 hours after the initial infection, samples of the flies would be removed and studied so as to observe the progression of the fungal infection. The researchers found that the fungus moved very quickly, rapidly infecting nervous tissue and ultimately infiltrating the brain within 48 hours. Once inside the fly's brain, the fungus is able to manipulate individual neurons, literally hijacking its physiology and piloting its body like a suit of fleshy power armor. The fungus, now in control of the chemical wiring of the fly's body, steers it upward and anchors the proboscis to a plant and raises the fly's wings. Keep in mind, it's alive for all of this. It's alive as the fungus infects its body and takes over its brain. The fungus needs the fly to stay alive so that it can use its body to transport it where it needs to go. But anyway, after this happens, after the fly has been hijacked and brought up and anchored to a leaf or a stem somewhere and its wings raised up in the death pose, it'll finally die. And when this happens, an estimated 312 genes, give or take, in the fungus are activated, and the growth of the fruiting body begins. As the infection began, the researchers saw that the flies would have an initial immune response, as their bodies naturally tried to fight off the invading fungal pathogen. It tried to expel the fungus and get it out of the body. But when it was unsuccessful and the fungus infection was able to take root, the immune responses died off and immune activity kind of went back to baseline. And instead, the genes involved in cell function in the flies were activated. So the fungus is not just manipulating neurons in the fly's brain, it's influencing which of its genes get expressed. This is the point where the fungus has seized control of the fly's body, and the fly's body is now working for the fungus, and not the fly. This gene expression has the fly produce nutrients for the fungus, and it helps the fly's body move where the fungus wants it to move. As fascinating as this all is, there's a lot that we don't know. This was just the first formal look into the chemical processes of a zombie fungus infection. The lead researcher, Carolyn Elia, said, and I quote, "Understanding how the fungus changes fly behavior, whether it's by directly changing the activity of all neurons, a few neurons, or by causing a cascade of non-neuronal changes in the host that ultimately lead to neuronal changes, will expand our understanding of ways to change behavior."